Hi, I'm Jim McCann, founder of 1-800-Flowers. We created this podcast to share the wonderful people we get to interact with, we get to meet, we get to know, and most importantly, get to learn from. So I invite you to join us on this journey here on the Celebrations Chatter podcast. Well, here we are today to talk about an important subject, and one that I think for me and for my comrades here at the Flowers companies, including Harry and David, really began to take notice of with the arrival of this thing called COVID. And that is the subject of caregivers. How many among us are caregivers? What are caregivers? What are the different types of caregivers? And my sensitivity has certainly been increased. And my co-host for this session, Rhonda Klug, who's a partner of mine and out at Harry and David in Rogue Valley in Medford, Oregon, has made this her cause, her mission, and was so appreciative of the fact that she did. Along the way, she's introduced me to the two wonderful people we have as our guests today. That's Selma and Zack. Selma Archer and Zack Demopoulos are people we've gotten to know who have just recently wrote a book, The Working Caregiver. And our conversation today should yield some really important information for all the members of our community to understand who are caregivers, what's going on with them, how is the world adjusting, how is society adjusting, how is the new work circumstances influencing the role of caregivers. And then more importantly, as we get into the meat of that, you'll hear how we as a company, not a big company, but a company, is trying to understand the changes, how to respond to them, how to make a flexible work environment that could be beneficial to the caregivers among us, and how can we play a role as a company in the cog of capitalism and Western businesses, play a role in helping to make this a better place for our team members, for their families, and ultimately for our community as a whole. So welcome, Selma and Zack, and welcome to our podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Selma, let's start with you. Tell us about the Working Caregiver, how the idea came about, but set the table for us. Give us some boundaries about how big a community are caregivers, what kind of caregivers are they, and Zack, help us to understand how big an issue it is and what's going on in the world of caregiving today.
So in terms of the size of the caregiver segment of the workforce, according to the U.S. Census, they predict that by 2030, that there will be about 73 million caregivers in the workforce, and that the number of people who are caregivers in this country will actually outnumber the number of people that are younger than 18. And that number will continue to grow as our population continues to age.
Selma, don't look at me when you talk about an aging population. Why are you looking at me when you say that? I resemble that.
I'm in the same category, so I feel your pain. I feel your pain.
So is that a much bigger number than it used to be, Selma?
It absolutely is, and will continue to grow. As I said, the population gets older, and the scary piece of that is that there's a lot of research out there that says that the majority of that segment of people will be unable to care for themselves, and they will need someone to help them with their daily activities. So in our book, we're talking about family caregivers. These are people that are either close friends or family members that are putting in unpaid time while they're actually working at other jobs, many of whom are working full-time jobs, some working part-time jobs, but they go to work or they work from home, they come back and they take care of that sick or ailing or aging family member. So we're talking about dual duty here.
So you're talking about not people who do this for a living for others,
Correct.
but for family, for people close to the individual or individuals that they're providing care to on a non-professional basis.
That is correct.
That's an astounding number, 73 million in less than a decade. That's just an amazing number. And what kinds of categories of people they're providing care for would make up the universe of people receiving care?
We're talking about people that are primarily people that are aging, mostly aging parents, a lot of disabled individuals as well. We, in our book, we don't focus on the children, but children certainly make up a portion of the people that are being cared for. But the data that we use in our book, we're focused primarily on aging individuals and adult individuals that are disabled.
If you don't mind, I want to touch on why this is a big issue and why Selma and I are really charged about this. Both Selma and I, even though I know we look very young, have lived through the perfect storm that was occurring with childcare. So many of the generations that are working today and previous generations don't realize what women have gone through in particular when they were having a child. And if they were gone more than 4 weeks from work, they were fired legally. And in the 80s, they started creating some laws which never really got passed in 1993 with FMLA. And the only reason people started waking up is because organizations were growing, economic growth was going like crazy, and they were losing all their women, their talent. And they're like, we need to figure some stuff out. And all of a sudden, you start seeing protected family leave and paid leave and childcare centers. Well, the exact same thing is going on now with elder care, but it's worse. And I'll tell you why it's worse. Because if you think about childcare, most of the time it's planned, right? And even if it wasn't planned, you got 9 months to get it together, right? And you'll save money for childcare, for college. You start saving money. Elder care is not planned. Most cases, like myself, my Selma, both of us were drafted into caregiving, and we weren't prepared, and we didn't save money for this, and we just didn't know what to do. And there aren't that many books back then about it, and even today there aren't many. So it's a big issue right now globally, and very much so in the U.S. And I don't think we're prepared for it, and we're hoping to get the message out, move the needle a little bit, and be a little bit faster, more effective in what we did back in the 80s and 90s with childcare.
Rhonda, where did you come across these two interesting cats?
I knew you'd love them, Jim.
How'd you meet Zack? And
I sat behind Rhonda in a meeting, and I was hitting her in the earlobe, like that annoying kid. I love Rhonda. I sat behind her at the Care Colloquium, now that we know how to say that word, and I felt her excitement.
Speak for yourself.
Yeah, I felt her, and she's the one who was shocked because nobody knew. I think the question at the panel that day, what was the question, Rhonda? How many caregivers are in your organization?
Yeah, and plus the question was, how many corporations are here today? I was the only one.
Only one. I loved it. She walked in as a business leader and walked out as a caregiver advocate.
Yes, I did.
Rhonda, what did you learn at that caregivers colloquium that sort of was the aha moment for you?
These are the care economy experts in the field coming to the table and helping those people that are caregivers. So they may still be caregivers, but they've gone on to create businesses that help support those that are currently caregiving. So listening to all of that, and when the question was asked about how many corporations do we have here today, then they started talking about why they need people, why they need corporations in that room. And so then once we had Q&A, I raised my hand and said, listening to this panel, the takeaway is you need to be reaching out to companies like ours to get people like us in the room. And to this day forward, that's what's happening with Kimberly Witter, who put on the Care Colloquium. They are making sure there's people. Delta Dental was in the room. They, at that time, had purchased a caregiving platform for their teams. And so that was the start of it. But the conversation is connecting, to your point, Zack, and getting the right people at the table to help spread the word. And the other aha moment was listening to people in the workforce going through all of this. And I just thought to myself, we really do need our own employee ERG. We have 4 of them already. Why not make one a caregiver ERG?
Well, let everybody know what our ERGs are.
Yeah, so employee resource groups. So I think you both Selma and Zack are familiar with those. We have a Black and Allies, we have a Latinx, we have a LGBTQ plus, we have a Women and Allies, and now we have a caregivers and allies responding with empathy. So we love it. Our mission statement is we see you, we hear you, and you belong.
Awesome.
So the whole idea here is to marshal the resources of free enterprise for businesses, like we have as a company for the other areas of interest of ours that we think by bringing people together, they can make life better for us all by making life more interesting and better for those specific groups that you just identified. And now your recommendation, it's been adopted by the company, is that the next category that we should turn our attention to provide some sense of community, some understanding, and perhaps some policy initiatives is for the whole community of people who cuts across gender, race, religion, is the whole category of caregivers. And Selma has told us that caregivers are in the tens of millions, 60+ million now, on its way to 73. And that's just focused on the caregivers among us who are taking care of adults in their communities, in their families, in their friend network. And then there's a whole other group about children as well. And I was chatting with Katie and Lisa, the producers here at our podcast. And, being the old guy here, I was recounting when I grew up, I didn't know there was a such thing as a nursing home because we all lived in multi-generational households, 1, 2, and 3 family homes that were chock close together. And you'd have a grandparents, you'd have grandkids, and everybody in between, cousins, nieces, nephews, all in the same household. And so caregiving was different then. And then in that post-war period, when us boomers came along, and we were the first generation to move for work in large numbers, to move for adventure and say, I'm going to try California next, and move across the country. We were the first generation to do that in any great number. And it seems like that's when things sociologically changed. And fast forward now 60 to 80 years later, and you have this phenomenon of a need for caregiving beyond the family environment. It might be within a family unit, but you don't have, to any great extent, that big extended family around. So as Zack and Selma, as you decided that this is an area that you want to focus on because you could thought you could make a difference when you decided to write your book about the working caregiver. Where were you working then that this became an interest of yours? Did you work together?
So one beautiful day, I was running in my neighborhood out here in California, taking a 2-hour run, and my phone rings, and it's Zack. And we end up having, 2-hour conversation?
I'm running the car in the parking lot, not wanting to go to work.
Yeah, and he's in New Jersey, I'm in California. And he starts telling me about his caregiver journey with his dad. And I had no idea that he had a caregiver story. And I shared with him my caregiver story about going back and forth from California. And I also lived in New York for a while to help my siblings take care of my ailing and a sick mom. And we decided that, and we both talked about how difficult it was to share that status of being a caregiver with our colleagues at work and with our employers, because there was such a negative stigma attached to, having to take care of someone at home and being there for them when the doctor called and said, we have to put them in the hospital or they have to go to the emergency room and all that. People, and I know I felt that it would threaten my job, that, I couldn't really dedicate myself to being there for my mom all the time and have a full-time job. So I just kept that to myself. and in the book you'll see that we talked about you juggle and disappear. And so that's what I did. I juggled as much as I could of my job responsibilities at work. And when I just could not do it effectively anymore, I left the company. So that is really what motivated me personally to work on this project, was that to help create care cultures in these organizations where the employer is aware of the caregiver segment in the company, they are in tune to what their needs are, and they're open and willing to provide those needs for those employees, because they can provide benefits, but if they're not the benefits that you need as a working caregiver, then they're not going to be effective, they're not going to be used. So we're hoping that this book helps to inform the employers as to what it is that a working caregiver needs to be successful for themselves as employees in the company, and also to help benefit the company.
So it sounds like that's the essence of the book, Zack, is that you want to shine a light on the category, bring some data and proper analysis to the category, and you want to encourage team members, employees, and employers to have a sense of awareness of the issue, and how, by being just thoughtful, they can be conscious of policies and procedures that could make it more manageable for people who are active caregivers, so that they can continue their employment, be productive, and have an open and clear understanding with their coworkers and their managers about what their circumstance is. And with just a little bit of awareness, sensitivity, openness, and flexibility, fewer people would be forced to leave the workforce. They'd feel more comfortable and open about being able to chat with their friends about their personal circumstance. And that would be better for them, for the people they care for, and ultimately for the enterprise they are employed by, because they wouldn't be losing people needlessly. All they need to do is bring some flexibility to the table. And as Selma just talked about, being conscious of the benefit package, being targeted so that not everybody's painted with the same brush, but that the benefit package is targeted differently for different people with different needs.
You're nailing it. You sound like either a great student or you're a great leader. I'm not sure which one, but you're nailing it. I mean, the research right now, when you survey organizations, I think the number varies from 10 to 20%. Organizations are stepping up and doing something about elder care. But if you peel back that just a little further, they might just say, yeah, we hired a third party, platform that you can do a 1-800-HELP-ME kind of thing, right? But what you just walked through, Jim, is not very easy to do. I mean, just reviewing policies and procedures and trying to get them to change is historically maddening. But why should it be that way, right? At the end of the day, I mean, so both Selma and I have worked in HR. Selma was in legal. We've seen and both frustrated with how slow an organization can move. I've seen consultants by the dozens come in and give you flavor of the month, not to insult any consultants out there, but they'll give you a flavor of the month, and then they leave you hanging. There's no sustainability, no accountability, no care culture change. So what you just said, Jim, if you could package that and say, we're going to do this for the next 3 years, you're totally going to make a huge difference to all your employees, without a doubt.
Jim nailed it, because those are the processes that we're currently working on.
Yep. And I just stole everything I learned from Rhonda, so I can't take credit. I think what Rhonda represents, though, seriously, is what I think is progressive. That is someone who said, hey, I think there's an issue here that's bigger than we realize. I'm going to go off and do some research about it, which caused her to go to your caregivers colloquium. She came back with a head full of knowledge and ideas, and has been the champion, the internal champion, working with our HR teams and with senior most leadership to say, hey, folks, I think there's an issue here. I think that we have a significant community among us who have special needs that heretofore we've not focused on or recognized enough, and it behooves us to benefit them and ultimately to benefit us as a company if we were to take some interest in this, learn from other people who are doing really good and thoughtful things like you guys in this community. And her interest was, hey, we have an opportunity, free me up a little bit. You give me an opportunity where I can pull together some things here and change the things we do. That would be to all of our benefits, because it's now a personal passion of hers. So that's what's going on here. I suspect there are Rhondas throughout corporate America who are beginning to say, hey, we can change things, and it's not terribly expensive. It's not, but it just takes focus. And I'm prejudiced because I think that when big time corporate America and not so big time corporate America decides that they want to engineer social change, it happens. It happens better than if 100 laws are passed, or if a mandate from on high comes down that you have to do this. It happens most when, I think, corporate America, capitalist corporate America, decides this is the right thing to do for this set of reasons. That's when things happen.
You don't have to go far back to look and see a good example of the pandemic and how all of a sudden organizations they were hesitant at first, but all of a sudden people are now offering flexibility. You can work from home, when in the past that was unheard of, right? So yeah, I agree with you 100%. This is 5 years in the making, this book. From the moment that she and I spoke on the phone that morning.
You just write slow.
You're not kidding. You're not kidding. And at the time, I was running with my wife a home care business. I ran one for 13 years, and we took over we helped care for 500 families. I hired over 700 professional caregivers, and I've worked with so many family caregivers. So actually, the longer it took, the better, because we have so much validation of what we're writing about that we are really confident that anybody that picks this up, whether it's an HR leader or a C-suite leader, a people manager, they are going to raise their eyebrows, because everybody has a story. As Rosalind Carter said, there are only 4 types of people in this world, right? There's people who have to receive care. There's people who have given care. There's people who are giving care today, and there's people who are going to give care. We touch on everybody in this book. But you know who I really hope to read? Selma and I were just talking about this a couple of weeks ago. We hope a Rhonda reads it, right? And says, whoa, I need to give this to my manager, because people aren't talking about it. And our title is called Working Caregiver, but our subtitle, which we've made it bigger on our cover now, is called The Invisible Employee. I love your motto, see you, hear you, you belong. It's exactly what we're trying to do with this book. We see you, but we got to help you be heard and help you feel belong.
We put our heart into everything we do. We are farmers, bakers, florists, and makers who grow and create with a passion. Made with love at every step of the way. Because at the end of the day, we know you're sending more than a gift. 1-800-Flowers, share with love.
Rhonda, how are you as our champion here? How are you knitting this sense of awareness, sense of focus, the see you, hear you, you belong concept into our companies?
So to your point, Zack, this affects, everyone, right? I mean, you just read Rosalind Carter's quote, which you beat me to that, by the way.
No, sorry.
But it's so true. Everyone we talk to internally across our enterprise, all of our 1-800 family of brands, everyone has a story. And so we created this ERG. We're kicking it off in November. It starts with Jim kicking it off during our town hall this month. And then we'll be meeting with our first group of employees after that kickoff. And we'll have our Microsoft Teams meetings, and we'll have resources set up. Debbie Howard, by the way, will be our guest speaker as well for that. She's been, as I think you know, she's been real prevalent in helping support and train our HR teams across the enterprise with how do we approach our employees. Because as you know, employees don't identify as a caregiver, right? But it's word of mouth. the more people you talk to, they realize, yes, this is for me. So we'll be kicking that off this month, and we'll be able to provide the resources that our HR teams have specially crafted up in terms of benefits. So we do have some nice benefits out there for our employees. And, it's a start. We will every month start to improve processes and just learn from people like you in the care economy, and continue to provide those resources for our employees, and just personal, just talking with people and listening to their stories and being real. Like, we'll start this off telling our own stories, because that's really what it's about. It just shows the compassion that you have and why we're doing this across the enterprise.
God bless you guys. I got to tell you, you're paving the way. You really are. Your care leadership is paving the way. And I got to tell you, conversation is the most important thing. I was a sales manager back in the day in pharmaceuticals, and full-time sales reps. That's all you had. You didn't have anything called part-time. And I was working in a women's healthcare division. And when my first top talent decided to quit, she says, I got to quit. We sat, we just talked. I just asked her questions. She says, look, I need to take care of this, take care of that. I go, would you consider working part-time? I didn't even know if I could do it. I didn't care. I just know that we needed to keep her and figure out ways to do it. And she goes, yeah. And so I was the first district in the company to start part-time sales reps. And I went from 3 sales reps that were part-timer to an entire team of part-timers. And we were the top. We were the best, without a doubt.
And that's what it takes. You need to have a rock star HR team that really believes in it. And we have that. So that's going to help pave the way for us.
So Rhonda, if I may just comment as well regarding your "we see you, we hear you, you belong," that actually is really a critical connection, because one of the major casualties of being a working caregiver, and I've felt and experienced this myself, is caregiver loneliness and isolation.
Absolutely.
And that really is a lot more, a big deal, more of a big deal than most people think that it is, because it really plays just as much on the physical health of the working caregiver as other, real physical ailments. Some of the research that we express in the book states regarding the caregiver loneliness and isolation that at least 70% of working caregivers experience this feeling of being alone, of no one understanding what they're going through. So this really, what you're doing here is really a great way to connect caregiver to caregiver so that they can share experiences, as well as in terms of the physical effect of isolation and loneliness. Research says that it increases mortality rate by as much as 50%. And also that it has the same effect on mortality as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So it's really a big step forward in the right direction in terms of helping working caregivers have that mental health that they want. So I certainly applaud you and your company for taking that on and not overlooking the fact that the mental component of working caregiver is just as important as the physical and other types of support that companies are providing.
Loneliness, social needs, something we are focused on here at Celebrations Pulse, Celebrations Chatter in our companies. It's something we spend a lot of time and attention on, and it just seems to make sense that people who have a draw on their time that others might not in their caregiving function are going to have less time, A, for themselves, and B, for their social needs. And I can see how that could be quite isolating.
Yes, absolutely. And also, they don't have the time. If, like when I was caregiving for my mom, if I had to choose between taking myself to a doctor's appointment and taking my mom to a doctor's appointment, just which way it went, I postponed my appointment and take my mom.
And it sounds like it was something you didn't feel comfortable talking about at work.
Exactly. Not at all. As a matter of fact, Zack was the first person that I shared my caregiving story with, and I had no idea he was going through the same thing.
Jim and Rhonda, in 2007, my father has a major stroke. 78-year-old Greek immigrant who is strong as an ox, never went to a doctor, smoked 2-3 packs a day. At 78 years old, he has a stroke. I'm in New York City. I just got promoted. I'm the CFO's HR guy. Big job, my dream job. And my dad is in North Carolina and has a stroke. I get a phone call from my brother. In 2 minutes, I have been drafted as a caregiver. I had to get on a plane, get down there, and take care of them. And I didn't know what to do. I'm in HR, and I didn't discuss it with anyone. I didn't tell my boss, the CFO. I don't think he cared. I just told him I need to leave. I didn't tell anybody for years what I went through. And it's scary when you think about that, right? That, we're in HR and we weren't role modeling those behaviors. We've written a book. We hope, Selma and I are really proud of this. We wrote it a story fashion. The book is about 2 characters, and we weave in some narrative and we weave in some research, but it's about 2 millennials, a female and a male, and we're telling their story. And we're hoping as people read this, they could start thinking, wow, that's me, or wow, that could be me. And they start talking about it some more. And all their chapters that we wrote are all experiences either we personally experienced ourselves, or all those 500 families that I helped take care of. We've pulled actual stories, experiences from them.
Zack, how did this interest in this field beget your career change?
I just did a LinkedIn post on this. It's funny. You always wonder what gets the most attraction on LinkedIn posts. I think it's pictures. And I just posted, it was the 35-year anniversary of the death of one of my best friends who had muscular dystrophy. A beautiful, incredible woman who died way too young at 24 years old. And she taught me everything there is about caregiving. He was this tough guy playing football in high school, and she wanted me to listen to Lionel Richie and pick her up and take her dancing. And she taught me how to really be a caregiver. Only years later did I get into this role, and I stunk at it. I made a lot of mistakes. And then my mother, I caring for my mother after my father passed away. When I left Pfizer, I was with Pfizer Pharmaceuticals. I really wanted to do something with my wife. And I've always had an affinity for the elderly. In fact, my wife used to pick on me. She goes, why we don't have any young friends? Because after church, you go and you talk to all the old people. and I love listening to stories. I just love listening to the Greeks telling their stories. And so I decided that I wanted to do something where I could feel like I could make a difference and kind of caregiver guilt. In a short answer, I felt guilty for not being in North Carolina physically to be there to care for my mom and dad every day. And so I felt like I got to do it maybe some other way in their honor. So that's kind of what got me in this business. And, I took 2 years off. I sold my business. And I got to tell you, I've been on the phone, through Zoom calls. Rhonda was one of them, but I've been on the phone for 2 years, 3 to 5 strangers a week, telling their caregiver story and see if I could help them for 30 minutes. And so that really inspired me to tell Selma, hey, Selma, we got to write a book. She's the writer. I said, let me help you write a book. Let's write a book. So we got to get the word out. And storytelling, Rhonda coming back from that meeting and telling her stories is what really motivates a leadership team. Consultants really aren't going to do it. Research data might do it, right? But if it's one of your prized employees coming to you and saying, hey, I just learned about this, I think we need to consider doing it.
Can we go back to the prized employees? No.
Yes. Top caliber employee.
It goes back to, you can't do it alone. You can't caregive alone, and you can't make something like this happen in a corporation alone. It definitely takes a lot of people. And we have a lot of great people to do this with.
And what do you hope happens, Zack and Selma? What do you hope happens as a result of this book being published on November 16th, which is right smack in the middle of National Caregivers Awareness Month? What do you hope happens?
I just really hope that one of the main things that happens is that we do raise awareness for employers around this whole segment that there are people in your organization that are in this, dilemma of working and trying to care for a family member. And it is possible to make it work for that individual, to make it work for the company, so that both went out. And the ultimate goal is to make it better for the care recipient. That's what I continue to focus on, because just going through it with my mom, my focus always remained on what's best for her. So I take the hits, I take the sacrifice to make sure her quality of life was the best possible up until the last day that she took her last breath. And I was able to be there to hold her hand, to talk with her. And to me, I would make that same choice again, because that was what I felt was the most important for me.
Rhonda, it sounds to me like what you're advocating for within our companies and on a broader stage is that people feel comfortable talking at work about their personal circumstance as it relates to caregiving, that they're not going to be thought of differently or inappropriately, that it's not going to impede their career progress. And they're not asking for time off. They're asking for flexibility, because those doctor's appointments at all come up and they're not usually in the off hours. And so I think what you're saying is, look, people need to get their job done, and they want to get their job done, but they're just asking that they can be open about their circumstance because they need the social benefit that comes from that. And they want to be able to have a discussion with their immediate supervisors about flexibility so that both things can happen. They have the flexibility to give the kind of care they need to and want to their loved ones, and they have the flexibility to get their job done in a little bit different a fashion. Is that where you're...
That's correct. And by doing that, we're keeping our workers in the workforce, our employees in the workforce.
I wonder how many people have been like Selma, have had to leave work because they were caregivers and they didn't feel they could talk about it. And therefore, the country and the company lost the benefit of a highly skilled, highly trained worker who felt like they had to leave.
More than you could imagine. I am one of the fortunate few males, part of a large Facebook group. I want to shout out to Liz O'Donnell, who's a big mentor of Selma and I. She's a huge caregiver advocate. Liz O'Donnell runs a Facebook group, private Facebook group called Working Daughters. It's grown to about 7,000 women. And I'm on there as the working dude. They call me the working dude. So, and they allowed me to be in there. And I got to tell you, Jim, the women that get on there, and because it's a safe space, that talk about their employers in negative ways because of the negative stigma and leaving the company and losing out financially is astounding. And so women are taking a big hit. You could see it in the Harvard Business School has done a lot of studies on this. There's a lot of research. We share some of that in our book, but women, it's a step back. You asked us, and Selma share with you, what do we want out of this book? That's one of the things I want out of this book. I mean, I heard stories about my mother being discriminated as a factory worker, as a woman. I don't want to see that. I don't want us to step backwards in this country because women are being impacted heavily. And also, to answer your question, it used to, the gap was closing between males and female caregivers. So remember, 25% of the caregivers out there today are young caregivers. So they're caring for a sibling, they're caring for a grandparent. So it's all ages, and it's males and females. But because of the pandemic and the recent crisis, all of a sudden it's back to a gap again. That's probably, I think, what is it, Selma, 60-40 maybe, males to females?
Yeah, it is.
So we got to stop that. We really have got to stop it, and we got to have the conversations no different than the one I had back in 1993 to the woman who was going to leave me and leave the organization because she was having care issues. And I also want to, another thing I hope we get out of this book is that we are having more conversations about this, and don't compare elder care with child care. It's not the same thing by a far stretch. Picture this. If you go and have a child and you come back to work, you're showing pictures of what? Brand new, bouncing, pretty baby, right? If you just go to the hospital and visit your parent who just had a fall or is dealing with bed sores, are you coming back to work and showing pictures of that?
No. Yeah, and I think the difference when it comes to children is children with disabilities, children with cancer. You know, you're doing real child care, caring for a child with, you know, those types of issues. Our ERG will touch on all of that. You know, so that's what we're bringing to the table.
Rhonda, tell us, as you think about how you'd like this group to evolve, this caregivers ERG, how would you take it a step further, and how would you think that it might evolve that we recognize and celebrate caregivers among us?
Yeah. So again, it's open forum, and that's what we're looking for. And it's very important that we're putting out the messaging that who is this for? You know, are you taking care of your parents? Are you taking care of your disabled children? Are you taking care of, you know, siblings or family members? And these are the people we're trying to pull in, the employees, because, and it's a learning process too. If we don't have the answer, we're going to find the answer. You know, we might contact you, Zack, or Selma, and say, you know, we would love to have you on for this specific reason as our keynote, because we have a topic here and there's more employees here that need support. And then it just grows from there. We'll continue to build our resources.
On the last day of the colloquium, Rhonda and I were there. And you remember, Rhonda, there were like 3 HR people in the room. They were invited from outside and they sat through it and they were totally motivated. But I'll never forget this. One of the HR people put their hand up and says, "Hey, do you have a template for this and a template for that?" And I don't know if you remember, Rhonda, but I just couldn't help it, but I had to just jump in. And my response to that is, no, that's not what we're saying here. There is no template for anything. You need to ask your own people in your own organization, how can we fix this? Selma and I, like I said, we're young old people. We were there when ERG wasn't an alphabet, okay? And when ERGs first came out, there was a lot of resistance to them. And what we used to tell our leaders is, look, you're paying consultants to tell you how to market your products to minorities. Why are you doing that? You're wasting your money. Why don't you go to your minorities in your own organization and ask them how to market your own products?
Yep.
It's a no-brainer.
And that's the beauty of having allies as well. All of our employee resource groups have allies.
Explain that.
Yeah, so you have people that may not necessarily be caregiving. We'll stick with the the caregiving and allies ERG. Maybe they've never been a caregiver. They've never taken care of anyone, but they may. So for them to come on and to help support someone and then realize, wow, I'm actually getting more out of this because this could be me someday. That's a big impact to a lot of people. Had I had this resource 3 years ago, I'm even going through some of our resources that we're going to be providing to our employees when we kick this off. And I'm just going through this going, wow, if I had this resource, I would have done things so differently. You know, it's just things that people don't think about because you're going through it. You know, like you say, you're keeping it quiet. You're not really asking people at the workplace, what do we even have resources here? So you're looking at this going, wow, or hearing from it and saying, oh my gosh, you know, I didn't realize, I didn't even think about that. Something as simple as, you know, it's hard to talk to your parents about a will. You know, do it because would you rather go into probate? I mean, that's just a little thing, but that little thing can can really be hectic on a person.
I suspect too that a byproduct of your work will be the creation of groups.
Yes,
where people can
exactly.
come together and talk to one another who are in similar circumstances and just get that chance to vent, to learn from one another's, and to feel part of a community.
Yeah, and to be seen. So, you know, the idea is, you know, I'm a visual person. I like to see who I'm talking to. So that will be an encouragement is, you know, please, you know, be visual so that we can see who we're talking to and really have a good conversation, a heart to heart, you know, compassionate conversation, because that's why we see you and hear you and we want you to belong. That's really important.
and Selma, please share your 3 principles that you created. I mean, we want to make sure though that we don't go in the wrong direction.
We see you, we hear you, and you belong. Our guiding principles that we expand on the book: acknowledge your working caregivers, listen to your working caregivers, and communicate with them, and show empathy in terms of creating a culture where they feel comfortable. And I think my experience, having created ERGs from scratch at more than one company in my career, so I have a lot of years of working with ERGs. One of the fastest ways to get people involved is to have senior leadership model the behavior. So if they see their senior leaders, not saying that they should come to the ERG and join the group, but if they see their senior leaders sharing their own caregiver experiences and showing empathy for what they're going through, it's going to go a long way in creating the trust that, they no longer have that stigma of, if I join this group, I'm going to be labeled a certain way and it's going to affect my career advancement. So if they see their senior leaders opening the door for them to participate by sharing themselves and their own stories, you're going to have people get involved.
And to your point, Selma, that's exactly why every one of our ERGs have an executive sponsor.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Because we've got to be able to practice what we're preaching, correct?
Yes.
And it comes from the leadership and our leadership's behind it.
And you've got to come across genuine, because, employees, listen, they're smarter than that. If they see that what consultant came here and sold this pack of goods, right? I mean, we're so guilty of it. Selma and I, in our old businesses, that employees would say, oh, well, how long is this going to last? 12 months? It's got to be almost grassroots, like you're doing, Rhonda, with your ERGs, talking to your HR people. It's got to be grassroots, and it's going to take time, but you will make a difference if it's organically grown, and leadership is role modeling it. One other thing I'll share, Jim, you don't have to have a caregiver story to be genuine or role model. You could just ask if somebody wants to share, and if nobody wants to, our hope is you pick up the book, says, look, can I share a story with you? It's in this book. Just share.
And what's the name of this book again, Zack?
Am I promoting it? Darn it. Hey, you can tell I'm the sales guy on the partnership here. Selma's the smart one. I'm the sales guy.
The Working Caregiver. The authors are Selma Archer and Zack Demopoulos. Thanks so much for being a pain in the neck and getting my Rhonda all fired up here. You got her on a mission.
Go, Rhonda!
Go, Rhonda!
But we're so thankful, Rhonda, that you got interested in this area, that you met Selma and Zack, and that you're bringing that insight, that wisdom to our company, to our culture, and championing this effort for us. What's the pub date on the book, Zack?
It's going to be coming out November 16th, and we intentionally plan that because November is Family Caregiver Month. And we figured that's a great way to get the message out this year.
Selma and Zack, thanks so much for the work you did in writing The Working Caregiver and bringing to market this month, this important month, being National Caregivers Awareness Month. It's been around for a long time, but the issue is just starting to see the light of day, and that's thanks to the work that you're doing.
Can we thank you too for what you're doing? Just like senior leaders have to role model for their employees, organizations need to be role modeling for other organizations. And Selma and I mean this genuinely. You guys are role modeling what needs to be done, and we just really appreciate your efforts. You're going to help move the needle.
Well, Rhonda and I and the rest of the team here have a very selfish motivation. If we can be more thoughtful, if we can be inclusive, help someone to feel less lonely, less alone, less misunderstood, and make them a more productive and long-term member of our team, serving our community, then we're the beneficiaries there as well as they are. So we have a very selfish motivation there. Thanks, guys. Really enjoyed the conversation, and I look forward to this and revisiting this topic again.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
It's my sister's birthday.
Go to 1-800-Flowers.com.
They have tons of great birthday gifts.
Wow.
Whoa.
Happy birthday, baby.
Wow.
Yummy. I got to contain myself.
1-800-Flowers.
Celebrate the people you love.
Well, I hope you enjoyed what you heard, and I know I'll be sharing it forward. I hope you get to as well. Let's keep the conversation going. Follow me along on Twitter at Jim1800Flowers and on LinkedIn at Jim McCann. Hope to talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to Celebrations Chatter. You can join our community by reaching out at chatter@celebrations.com. And while you're at it, tell us what topics you'd like us to explore here on the Celebrations Chatter podcast. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to share it forward.